Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 700 Club. Chaos, chaos in the Kremlin. Russia came to the brink of civil war this weekend. The uprising has left President Vladimir Putin both humiliated and vulnerable.
The Russian government is trying to project the image that everything is under control. Others say the crisis shows Putin's war and his regime are crumbling. Dale Hurd reports.
In a video released by the Russian government, Defense Minister Shoigu is said to be inspecting troops in Ukraine. Shoigu was one of the leaders Yevgeny Prigozhin's mercenary army was coming after for alleged corruption and incompetence in running the war in Ukraine. But the biggest victim of the uprising has been Vladimir Putin himself. One UK newspaper cites British intelligence that it was Kremlin threats against the families of Wagner Group leaders that forced them to abandon their march to Moscow. Still, the 36 hours of turmoil left Vladimir Putin looking humiliated and vulnerable.
We've seen some very serious cracks emerge. 16 months ago, Putin was on the doorstep of Kyiv in Ukraine, looking to take the city in a matter of days, erase the country from the map. Now, he's had to defend Moscow.
Friday, Prigozhin, a longtime Putin ally whose Wagner private army has been fighting alongside Russia in Ukraine, announced a march for justice, effectively an uprising against Russian military leaders. Wagner forces seized control of 2 Russian military hubs in the south Friday, and Russian media reported the downing of several helicopters and a military plane. In Rostov-on-Don, Russians were seen cheering and applauding as Prigozhin and his convoy headed to Moscow. But they never made it, turning back just 120 miles from the capital, amid reports of a deal with Putin calling for Prigozhin to leave Russia for nearby Belarus. Russia now says it's dropping its charges of mutiny against Prigozhin. But the damage against Vladimir Putin's image as a leader who cannot be challenged is by most accounts immense. Perhaps just as importantly, Prigozhin has lifted the veil on Russian state propaganda on the war in Ukraine, telling the Russian people they've been lied to.
Putin himself went on national TV to respond to Prigozhin, and Prigozhin said that your government has lied to you. This is not a war that NATO started. There are no Nazis in Ukraine. Taking down the very premise makes it much more difficult for Putin to continue to turn to the Russian people and say we should continue to send people to die in this war.
Russian-British commentator Vlad Vexler says the crisis now allows Russians for the first time to consider a future without Vladimir Putin.
Now it's a little more possible for Russians and say, what if we don't go down to the bottom of the inferno with Mr. Putin? What if there is an alternative?
The White House says it will continue to support Ukraine in its defense against Russia. In a phone call, President Zelensky asked for more weapons and shared concerns that Russia may be planning to blow up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, weeks ago on this program, we talked about when you enlist the Wagner Group to help your nation, which many have, and Dale has reported on it, they often become vulnerable and slaves to the Wagner Group themselves. And we saw that with this humiliating, long-term loss for Vladimir Putin. And as our Secretary of State said 16 months ago, Putin's saying he's knocking on the door of Ukraine's capital, and now he's defending his own nation. So we'll continue to follow it. In other news, evangelical voters expressed enthusiastic support for former President Donald Trump this weekend. George Thomas has that story and more from the CBN newsroom. George?
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Republican presidential candidates came to the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference in our nation's capital. As CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson reports, there was no match for the crowd's enthusiasm when the frontrunner Donald Trump took the stage.
This year's conference is a must-stop for 2024 GOP presidential primary hopefuls, as each hopes to win the coveted support of evangelical voters.
And thank God Almighty for the Dobbs decision.
The 2024 contenders highlighted their pro-life, pro-family policies.
Every Republican candidate for president should support a ban on abortion before 15 weeks as a minimum nationwide standard.
And touched on 2 hot-button issues, education and gender identity.
The left is lighting the fire of a cultural revolution all across this land. We are told that we must accept that men can get pregnant.
While most candidates spoke Friday, former President Donald Trump had the primetime Saturday slot.
Were your other candidates treated this way? I don't think so. Actually, I saw one who was booed off the stage.
Many attendees told CBN News Trump is their top choice.
I'm still a forever Trumper, and I love everything that he's done for the country.
Kind of leaning towards him still, but we'll see what the future decides.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was the only candidate to criticize Trump by name, calling him a failed leader, unwilling to take responsibility for his mistakes.
You can boo all you want, but here's the thing. Our faith teaches us that people have to take responsibility for what they do. People have to stand up and take accountability for what they do.
Every announced 2024 GOP candidate spoke at the conference.
There's no path to the Republican nomination for president that doesn't go through the evangelical community.
Faith and Freedom Coalition founder and chairman Ralph Reed tells CBN News the evangelical constituency is the largest and most dynamic of American voters.
I mean, it's bigger than the African American vote, the Hispanic vote, and the Union vote combined. And that's why all these candidates are here.
While Reed doesn't plan to endorse in the primary, he's seeing strong support for Trump from conservative evangelicals. Regardless of the outcome, he believes they will enthusiastically rally behind the eventual nominee.
I think the faith community is going to step up in a big way in 2024 and turn out like never before.
While candidates will address many of the same crowds over the coming weeks, they won't face each other until the first debate August 23rd. The big question is how many will make it to that stage. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thank you, Abigail. This weekend marked the one-year anniversary since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, sending the abortion battle back to the states. Friday, pro-life leaders announced a new push to make sure all states protect the unborn, declaring the Constitution's 14th Amendment, which forbids states from denying any person equal protection under the law, applies to children in the womb.
It is the time to turn our attention as a movement to the new North Star, which is equal protection for all, as our Constitution promises.
The leaders are calling for federal and state laws to reflect that children are persons from the earliest embryonic stage. The risks and promises of artificial intelligence was the topic of a presidential forum in San Francisco recently. The gathering of tech leaders dealt with how to manage and regulate the rapidly developing technology.
My administration is committed to safeguarding America's rights and safety, from protecting privacy to addressing bias and disinformation, to making sure AI systems are safe before they are released.
The president called AI an incredible opportunity while warning against potential harm if it goes unregulated. You know, one of the great promises of artificial intelligence is the possibility for medical breakthroughs. Scientists in Switzerland recently showed AI's potential for treating spinal cord injuries by using it to help a paralyzed man walk again. Medical reporter Lori Johnson has that story.
40-year-old Gert Jan Oskam lost the use of his legs more than a decade ago in a motorcycle accident. Thanks to technology linking his brain signals to his legs, he can now stand, walk, and even climb stairs.
Within 5 to 10 minutes, I could control my hips. Like they were like the brain implant picked up what I was doing with my hips, so that was like the best outcome, I think, for everyone.
In order to walk, our brain sends commands down the spinal cord to a specific area responsible for controlling movement. Injuries to the spinal cord can interrupt that communication, causing paralysis. The Swiss doctors and scientists, however, developed a way to restore that communication through a different pathway.
This project shows something completely new that is not anymore science fiction, but we can give back hope to the people with a spinal cord injury and they will be able to walk again thanks to this digital bridge.
It involves 2 surgeries, one at the brain where doctors implant 2 electrodes to record its signals. Then electrodes are placed on the spinal cord area responsible for leg movement. The brain sends signals to a laptop computer equipped with artificial intelligence that decodes the thoughts of the patient, then encodes the desired movement to stimulate the legs.
So of course, the patient is not walking normally as us, able-bodied person, but we have some kind of a cyborg in a way that have artificial intelligence extracting information and enabling to restore a digital communication.
Oscom received his implants in 2017. He says although it's taken hard work to learn how to use the system, it's worth just being able to do normal things again.
Just an example, I'm training 10 years to stand up with a friend having a beer. And that's something I think people don't realize.
The system is still being tested. 4 other people are set to try it with the hope that it can eventually become available to many more with spinal cord injuries. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Andrew and Terry, just imagine a digital bridge that bypasses the spinal cord injury, sending the signal straight from your brain to your legs. Incredible.
Incredible, George. You're absolutely right. And we've talked about the risks and dangers of artificial intelligence. So this is very encouraging and exciting to see a development like this in the medical community. Thanks for the report, Lori.